Emergency alert, your World War III update. The death spiral of human civilization continues undeterred today. Evacuation orders currently in place for numerous communities in the Great Canadian Boreal Forest. We are seeing unparalleled wildfire activity up here right now. I've been warning people about this for years. The fires are only going to get worse, even if you don't live in a wildfire-prone region. We're seeing wildfires in the temperate rainforest. We're seeing fires take place where there just ought not to be any, okay? So you have to have a get out of Dodge plan. You have to know the unconventional means of egress from your locale in the time of an emergency. It might not be a natural disaster. It could be war, like they're currently experiencing in eastern parts of Ukraine, where they're now being evacuated in the Sumy and Kharkov regions. But the time is going to come where you may have to pack all of your things, and the best laid plans that you have are going to go awry. So for this reason, you got to have an escape plan. And right now, the fires that we are seeing, they're moving so fast, very similar to what we've seen in Texas, and it's due to a combination of reasons. One, the drought, record drought in numerous places across Western Canada, in the northern part in particular. In addition to that, you're seeing these high winds that are caused, and I'm no meteorologist, but I'm assuming that they have something to do with the aberrations in the jet stream caused by the heating up of the Arctic and blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to get into the details of that, but you have higher pressure systems interacting with lower pressure systems, and that creates high winds. That creates the perfect conditions for wildfires to spread at breakneck speeds. 1 minute you're on your couch drinking a beer, and the next you're watching an emergency update saying that you need to get out of Dodge. So you got to have a plan for how you're going to escape these types of situations. We got a lot of stuff today, so let's just get right to it. But first, I want to say one thing that everybody should have in their car if you work in a high-rise building. If you can't afford a gas mask, get yourself a fire mask. You see all these videos all the time. If you don't have like a Tesla that has the bio CBRN defense mode, Teslas have this mode, or some of them, I think the Model S does, and the Model X as well, that you can block out the contaminants. And for the most part, when you're driving through those wildfires and it's very smoky and you have all of these gases and stuff, you're probably going to be okay if it's for a short period of time. But if you ever have to evacuate a place that is burning down, you don't want to succumb to all those toxins, so you need to have a respirator. These are called the fire mask. These are under $50. They give you 60 minutes. There is a chemical in here that inactivates the carbon monoxide. It's going to allow you to breathe when there's no oxygen. And this is just something that everybody should have. There's no reason not to have this, especially if you work in a high-rise building. Even if you're not preparing for a fire per se, fires are going to be a big problem when the shit hits the fan. So you got to have a plan for that. If you live in an urban environment and you don't plan on evacuating, get ready for fires. When emergency services cannot come to your rescue, especially in the cities, it's just going to be fires everywhere, especially if we go full-blown nuclear Armageddon, which is seeming more and more likely by the day. Now, what is happening out there in Ukraine, I tell you, man, you know, the Ukrainian government has lied to their people over and over and over again. And people keep on falling for it. They told them that the Russians aren't going to invade. Just stay in your homes. We're going to take care of you. There's not going to be any problems. And before you know it, you are thrown on the front line against your will, in many cases, kidnapped off the street by these commissars, or recruiting agents, as they're called. And if you try to resist, you are beaten. You can no longer record this. There's no more elections. What else? There's no freedom of the press anymore. And now you have Anthony Blinken, I shit you not, in a Kiev nightclub today, which is tonight there right now, singing his own rendition of Keep On Rocking in the Free World. What once was an American classic, and still is an American classic, especially the SNL live version that Neil Young did. I mean, that was freaking epic. It's too bad that Neil Young lost his mind during the pandemic with the Spotify fiasco. But I still love Neil Young, even though he lost his brain, okay? You can't beat, Keep On Rockin' in the Free World, man. But for Anthony Blinken, of all people, to be singing that, like literally singing it. If some of you guys don't know, but he plays the guitar. I don't know if I'd say good or bad. That's neither here nor there. It's just the irony and the hypocrisy of it all. That it's anything but that, okay? This is Orwell, is rolling and doing flips in his grave right now if he were to understand what is actually happening today. So shit's hitting the fan all over the place. Have an evacuation plan. It's going to happen to you. We just think we're immune. I think I'm in the middle of nowhere, that I'm going to be immune. It could be a grass fire. It could be anything. I often hear people say things like, well, I don't live in a region which is prone to wildfires. I live in a place that is humid or a temperate rainforest-like climate. I mean, South America is seeing wildfires on a scale never before seen. We are seeing fires here in places that there just shouldn't be. I'm talking about the West Coast, not particularly this year yet, but I mean, the year's just getting started, and these fires are insane. I've been warning people about it for years. This is one of the downsides of living off the grid that not a lot of people think about, and it's going to become more and more of an issue. And this may be how the government, when I say they, get us off the grid. You know how they're always trying to scare us off the grid? There is a legitimate threat here, okay? The legitimate threat is that all of these issues exacerbated by human activity, it's a reality, it's a science. What if you believe it or not, I don't really give a shit at this point in time, because it's going to reach out and touch you. It's going to reach out and touch me. I'm making contingency plans for it. We're not going to get into the details of that in this video, but you got to have a plan, okay? Now, in terms of things that are going on elsewhere in the world, besides Fort McMurray, which is a large urban center which is being evacuated, or at least the periphery of is being evacuated in northern Alberta, asides what's going on there, we got some weird stuff going on. Right now, it was reported that 45 Chinese fighter jets were currently spotted in the ADIZ, which is the Aircraft Defense Identification Zone. 45 People's Liberation Army Air Force planes in that region. That is a record. Okay, now why is this happening now? I believe that they're having the inauguration of the Taiwanese president soon. And this could also have something to do, I mean, everything is related. When you think of geopolitics, and all of this polycrisis stuff, it is all connected, okay? What's happening in Iran, what is happening in Russia and North Korea and China is increasingly becoming more harmonized. Somebody who provides me information coined the term, the quadriga of, what was it, of axis, the quadriga of, I can't quite remember. I know I've said it in a video before, but basically you have those big four, and they're all increasingly becoming more harmonized in terms of their strategic planning. And case in point, in the next couple days, Vladimir Putin is making a trip to go see Xi Jinping. Now, and because of this, you have to look at everything in its context, okay? We got the F-16s, we got Steadfast Defender, we got the nukes on the border, we got the Kharkov offensive, we got Vladimir Putin going to meet Xi. Every time they do this, usually that precedes some inflection point or some market shift. You have the reshuffling of Putin's cabinet post re-election. All of these things are coinciding for a reason. Now you have 45 fighter jets in the Taiwan ADIZ, and yeah, almost like, hey, you guys forgot about us, just reminding you that we're still here. You have escalation happening rapidly in terms of the Middle East conflicts. Hezbollah lost a big name today. Somebody who was a high-ranking officer was taken out by Israel, but Israel is taking losses as well in the south and the northern parts of the Gaza Strip. The war with Hezbollah is ratcheting up. The fact that they're not calling it a war yet is kind of staggering, and it's a very similar situation that we're seeing in Ukraine, where they're really treading lightly, and I'm talking about both sides, to prevent and to try to manage that escalation so it doesn't go vertical. And thank God, because of course, now the rumor has it that Iran already might have nuclear weapons. And this is probably why Israel is not going all in, and Hezbollah is not going all in, but everything is just kind of smoldering right now, but it could just flare up at any time. So you have this Blinken trip coinciding with Putin going to visit Xi Jinping. You have Sumy being evacuated. You have intermittent power outages throughout all of Ukraine. Ukraine, I can never say this word, Ukrainergo. The main power transmission company in Ukraine has announced today the introduction of controlled emergency blackouts. They're chalking this up to recent damage by Russian airstrikes on their power grid. So the airstrikes by the Russians have finally taken their toll. And they're saying it's also due to a cold snap, but I pay close attention to the climate stuff, and I can tell you that while it is slightly below normal there right now, for the better part of the year, there wasn't even winter this year. And that's from people who are on the ground in Ukraine, probably part of the reason why operations were limited throughout the course of winter, because the ground didn't get hard enough in a lot of places. So whatever sort of cold snap, it's not it's not a record cold snap by any stretch of the means. In Russia, there are certain parts of Russia that still have snow that typically don't have snow. But this is what we're seeing. We're seeing extremes. So this is why you have to have a plan, even if something is not typical in the place that you're in, okay? The purges from the Russian Ministry of Defense are interesting. Apparently, according to Newsweek, there's been new information leak, and if you don't know what's been going on with the Russian government, I mean, all kinds of people are being shuffled around. You got, of course, the Russian MOD placement being taken over by a guy who is more technocratic in nature and focused on a long-term war with NATO. You got Shoigu now being moved in his position. You also have the chief spokesperson, the guy with the glasses who would always come on and report the numbers every day. He is now out of the game. There's been this massive shakedown, and according to Newsweek, this is due to nuclear secrets being leaked. 2 weeks ago, before Shoigu's sacking, they're calling it a sacking. Many people are also calling it a promotion, of course. Newsweek leans heavily to the angle of Western bias. Igor Shushko, the executive director of the Wind of Change Research Group, which is likely some sort of NATO-funded propaganda organization, claimed that the former defense minister and his deputies, Ivanov and Salikov, had been accused of leaking nuclear secrets and could be facing state treason charges. Now, if something were to happen, I don't think Shoigu was involved in this. I think him and Putin are pretty tight. But if this were to happen under his tutelage, then he, of course, would have to be, he would have to resign or have this honorable displacement to another position. I think what has happened here, they're saying that raids on Ivanov and accomplices yielded data on classified military projects, including nuclear installations. Now, a lot of Russia's installations are on mobile platforms. I'm certain that they have some stationary strategic weaponry, but this is pretty serious, okay? And I've always said that there's an espionage war being waged behind the scenes that, you know, we just don't see. In fact, I still believe this was the basis of October 7th, and now that's been corroborated by a lot of other evidence that has come out that, in fact, the whole purpose of that operation was to acquire information about the Israeli strategic forces, because, of course, again, this is a war between the quadriga of allies and the quadriga of axis, and as such, they're all coordinating their activities increasingly more so by the day. So, in contravention to all top secret protocols, Salikov and Ivanov provided access to secret documents about Russia's nuclear shelf, among other things, to persons who did not have any level of security clearance. Now, if this was a mistake, I believe that the new Russian Minister of Defense said something to the effect of mistakes are okay, but lies are not. So are they suggesting here that perhaps there was some malfeasance in terms of what the purpose of these leaks were, or was this just you know, being careless and talking to somebody about something? We don't know. But regardless, one of my concerns is this shakeup in government. When you're seeing all this nuclear posturing, and not just typical nuclear posturing, but the actual positioning of nuclear weapons closer and closer to the front line, you have to wonder if Putin is worried about continuity of government. Is he worried that in the case of a nuclear war, or in the case that he is taken out, because of course now come May 18th, Zelensky, in the eyes of the Russians, he's not the legitimate leader of the country. And because they are a jurisprudent bunch of people, they're likely going to potentially leverage that in order to step up the campaign and potentially try to take Zelensky out. And that, of course, would put a big target on Putin's back, because I'm quite certain that there are contingencies, dead hand contingencies, if you will. Dead hand was a system that the Russians devised, which is probably maybe still in operation, we don't know, everything's classified, was a system that was devised that should the Russian leadership be taken out, dead hand would ensure that all of their nuclear missiles fired. And it could just be that there is some other level of dead hand at play here that Putin is trying to set in place, just in case the dominoes start to fall rapidly. This shakedown in government is to make sure that everybody is on board for the next phase of this conflict. Now, it may just be the conventional line of thinking on this is that Russia is preparing for a 10-year war with NATO. That's what the Polish president said today, that it's very likely that this war is going to last at minimum 10 years. So imagine 10 more years of walking on such thin ice, getting closer and closer and closer, just like Zeno's paradox, to this inevitable conclusion of possible nuclear engagement. You know, I mean, people are going to be so incredibly desensitized to all this in another year, never mind 10 years. I mean, we could be to the point where the nukes are inbound and we've just become so desensitized to it that we just scroll on TikTok instead. I mean, it could get to that point where we are just too primed for this. So, but all I can say is just stay ready. I believe that the GameStop 2.0 thing, I believe that that's a prelude to market crashing at least 30%. That's what happened back in 2021. I think that's precisely what we're going to see, because it's a zero-sum game. And if you bleed these hedge funds dry, that money has to come out of somewhere. And it creates an imbalance in the market, and that can trigger the algorithms to sell, and then everything just goes to shit. So we could see a big sell-off, especially if we see a black swan event. Either way, it's war, it's financial crisis, it's wildfires, it's shit's hitting the fan. You got to prepare, okay? The U.S. is now starting or ramping up the financial war. They've now officially banned Russian uranium. American nuclear facilities largely rely on Russian uranium, a certain type of uranium that is refined to the spec required for these nuclear facilities. And as such, now you're probably going to see increases in energy prices. Of course, this is all part of the decoupling, which could be good for industry inside the United States. It's going to take a while to get going, but it also means that those connections that are made, because you might not like globalism, you might not like the multinational corporate realm of things, but the fact is this acts as a preventative factor against conflict. When countries have mutual interests, even if they are adversarial, financial mutual interests, they have a reason not to go to war with one another. As the United States threatens to seize Russian assets and disconnects from acquiring resources, and I'm sure they're still going to get it in a roundabout way. But the thing with this is that this is one of those things that Biden didn't have to do. And I don't think it would have been met with a whole bunch of protests so long as the money kept coming in. So the fact that they're doing it tells you that this is serious. I don't even know if the American ambassador to Russia has returned or not. I know that she left there about a week ago and for an undisclosed period of time, but I don't know if she's returned yet. And so all of these things, all of these pieces put together means that, I mean, we're constantly on the edge of our seat, and it's just going to get worse and worse. I mean, the amount of news that is coming out, it's just become so overwhelming. Every country across Europe, it's now become commonplace for a population, for governments, not always in the most explicit of ways because they don't want to spook the population, but pretty much all of them now, especially in the Baltic states, are encouraging people to prepare for war, prepare your bug out bags. They're doing all the steadfast defender training to normalize the presence of troops in the streets. Like right now, Lithuania is training house to house. NATO soldiers are actively training house to combat on the border with Belarus. The forces of the French 1st Infantry Regiment from Sarrebruck, who specialize in urban house-to-house combat, are training. They're part of the German-French Brigade in the multinational exercise Grand Quadriga 24. Okay, so they're getting everybody acclimated to this level of militarism, and the war is going to last 10 years, according to Radoslaw Sikorski. So it's not looking good. Even the Polish soldiers are being prepared for war. This is from my source in Poland. The Polish Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, while visiting Polish troops stationed along the Polish-Belarusian border, has, among others, announced changes to the legal system that will make it much harder to accuse uniformed personnel, that could be soldiers, policemen, or border guards, of any crimes committed during combat or any type of other operations. Basically giving people the green light to be more aggressive with their tactics. Now, they're saying that the border issue with Belarus and Poland is due to immigration, and there definitely is that reality. It pales in comparison to the immigration crisis. In terms of sheer numbers, it's not even remotely close to what you're seeing in the United States, yet they're going to the extent of putting hedgehogs and barriers and, you know, the whole 9 yards, tanks and pillboxes and all that stuff on the border. So it seems like they're using it as an excuse to prepare for war with Belarus, and perhaps both sides are. There are some rumors circulating today that Belarus was preparing to invade Poland, and just on its face, I didn't even give that too much attention, because there's an interactive map that I'll show you guys that shows the position. It's open source intelligence, as far as we know. Most of this stuff you can see from space, of Belarusian forces, and there just isn't a large enough concentration of force to do any sort of incursion, meaningful incursion, especially seeing as that's just going to give NATO the excuse it needs. If anything, this is mirroring, and what's likely going to happen is Poland or NATO is going to try to do something in Belarus. Of course, Belarus now has nuclear weapons, though, and they are a force to contend with. On the economic front, Biden just also declared war against China. So much for the whole Beijing-Biden thing. I don't know what Trump's going to call him now, that he can't call him Beijing-Biden. And this is why, if you need a solar system, lock it in now. Okay, because, well, it's probably too late. I don't know when this is supposed to go in effect, but he just imposed a series of tariffs on goods made in China, 25% on steel and aluminum, 50% on semiconductors, 100% on EVs, and 50% on solar panels. Again, all par for the course of the new multipolar reality that we're all going to be living in. And you know, this is crazy to think. You know, you got the TikTok ban, which I agree with, by the way, for reasons I'm not going to get into in this video. But this is the reality. Okay, this is what decoupling looks like. In some ways, this could mask the deterioration of the economy by actually boosting domestic production. And, you know, maybe this is just this is going to be the austere conditions that we need to rebuild in this side of the world, where we've become wholly dependent on China. But in terms of our ability to manufacture all the stuff that we enjoy on the cheap, those days are over. So as I've always said, if you see this supply glut right now for things that you know are made in China, and you're seeing these sales 25, 30% off, capitalize on that, because we're fast approaching a point where that stuff is not going to be available, where those shipping containers are not going to be coming from overseas anymore. Okay, so just seize the day. Carpe diem. Stockpile that freeze-dried food. And yeah, you know, if you can, make sure you hit up the hardware section as well. The US is going to be boosting output of bunker busters. Okay, right now they produce about 2 of these a month. And why do they only produce 2 a month? Because they're 30,000 pound massive ordnance penetrators, only capable of being dropped from a B-2 stealth bomber. Now, they're saying that the purpose of these bombs is going to be for North Korea and Iran. North Korea and Iran have some of the most extensive and deepest underground networks of nuclear strategic facilities in the world. Okay, I mean, when you're Iran and North Korea, you got nothing better to do but dig. Now, they're claiming that these bombs, which I don't even think they're going to be able to put a dent in these facilities, but I guess it fuels the military-industrial complex, so they probably don't really care. But the facility under construction at a 70 square mile Army ammunition plant, 70 square miles, 181 square kilometers, will significantly increase production as needed. We're going full-blown war economy. I hope people realize that. The war with Russia and China and North Korea and Iran, whether you're tired of it or not, whether you're in the comment section saying, oh, you said things were going to happen, we've never said definitively that anything was going to happen. Yes, the conclusion is inevitable. We're going to war with the Russians and the Chinese. How and when that materializes, nobody knows the time and day. But we know that at this point in time, barring some miracle, okay, maybe it's going to take aliens, we crack cold fusion and the party's on once again. Maybe AI comes in and resolves the problem and mediates. Maybe we all, I don't know, just join the Borg and augment ourselves. Find common interest in that respect. I don't know, but it's going to happen, okay? So you just got to prepare. And that's why you're seeing me do these videos on the fly, because I'm racing. There's just something, I just got that feeling, man, that something's coming. And anytime I've had that feeling, it's usually right. It's just my timing is always, and not only in the markets as well. You guys don't know, I play the markets a little bit, and every time I intuitively know, because I don't just look at, when I'm doing like investing, I don't just look at, okay, what are the short-term trends? I'm always thinking, okay, if we know that we're going to be going into a multipolar world, we know that, people are going to be relying on certain types of technologies in the future, then X, Y, and Z. Like, this is how I think. I don't just think about economics in a vacuum. I don't base my financial decisions on what the Fed and all that stuff is doing. I base it on what is the material reality of what human beings need. And in the same way, I get those inklings that something is going to pop, and it always does. Sometimes I just don't wait long enough, because typically my predictions are premature in terms of when they're going to unfold. But they typically, most of the time, are based in reasoned analysis, I believe. And I'm not saying that you should take my advice, take it or leave it. It is what it is. I'm telling you what I'm doing. I'm looking at this stuff every single day, 12 hours a day, and everything within my being right now is telling me to prepare, prepare, prepare. On that note, I gotta go and prepare some more. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and pick up a fire mask from CanadianPreparedness.com. That's the best way to support the channel. Great product. And make sure you have an evacuation plan. Check out our videos on unconventional methods of egress from a densely populated urban environment. I'll post links to that in the description below. Take care, guys.